Great. So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Social Rights Ireland weekly meeting and podcast. I'm standing in for Roisin this evening, and we're really very honored to have with us this evening as our guest, Fra Hughes, longtime activist for Palestine, who is proudly, I think, wearing right now as we speak the uniform of the Israeli dungeon service. He was part of the Sumud Flotilla, one of several hundred people who were picked up, kidnapped in international waters in the Mediterranean, taken in brutal conditions, under conditions of extreme physical abuse, mental abuse, taken to some of the worst prisons in Israel where they were, well, I won't preempt it. We've got Fra here to talk about his experience and the experience of his comrades on the flotilla. Fra, thanks so much for joining us. The whole thing must be still very fresh in your mind. I don't have any particular questions to ask you other than what happened and, how do you, 1 week later, roughly, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the invitation to appear on the show. The second thing I want to say is, regardless of what happened to the people in the international Global Sumud Flotilla to Gaza, it is nothing in comparison to what happens to the Palestinian prisoners day and daily. People who are raped by dogs, women raped by male soldiers, there's medical neglect. There's people being tortured to death. There are over 400 children, several hundred women, probably thousands of people under administrative detention orders, just like internment without trial. So, not guilty of any crime, not convicted, not sentenced in their due process, not given the opportunity to defend themselves in front of a judiciary, to have someone represent them and to act as a rebuttal for whatever evidence is brought forward. Secret evidence, probably made up, used to detain people who would be a thorn in the side of the illegal occupation, specifically in the West Bank, but now increasingly in Gaza, where over 70% of the land has now been occupied. So we had the Nakba in 1948. We had 750,000 people forcibly exiled. You have the United Nations Resolution 194, the right of return, yet none of those people have ever been allowed to return, and there are now between 7 and 8 million Palestinians in the global diaspora. On the 5th June, this week, will be the commemoration of the Naksa, which was when another 400,000 people were put out of historic Palestine in the Six-Day War, started by Israel and backed by America. We're witnessing really history just repeating itself. So 750,000 people in 1948, 400,000 people in 1967. We've had something like 80,000 murdered, like 120,000 injured. It's like 10% of the Gazan Palestinian population. And the threats are continuing that these people will be forcibly removed from Gaza. So you have somewhere around 1.9 million people now living in less than 30% of what was Gaza, which was 25 miles by 6. So I don't know the maths, but you think of cramming people in what was the most densely populated concentration camp in the world. You take 70% of that living space away, then you starve people. You don't allow them medical treatment. You murder their doctors. You bomb their hospitals. You bomb the universities. You bomb the infrastructure. You bomb the sanitation infrastructure and the sewage. So people are constantly trying to find food, trying to find water, trying to find medicine. People are dying for the lack of simple medicines. Like, I'm type 2 diabetes, so it's important that I take my medication every day. Could you imagine being type 1 insulin dependent in Gaza? No medicine, you're gone, your history. Not just the dead, but the injured. So if we're going to talk about what happened on the global flotilla, I think we need to put it in context. People are interested in what happened in the last kind of 72 to 86 hours of my incarceration. under military occupation, just like the Palestinians. But the siege in Gaza started in 2006, 2007. And the reality and the context is that both the Israelis and the Americans, and by extension the EU, said to the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, we need one voice to speak for the Palestinian people. We can't have a peace agreement, in the West Bank and a separate peace agreement in Gaza. We need one voice to speak for the Palestinian people. Now, that said, Israel, Netanyahu, and that whole kebab of fascist monsters, which are representative of the fascist monsters in the society of the Zionist colonial occupation, uh, they don't want peace. The only peace they want is another piece of Palestine, another piece of Gaza, another piece of the West Bank. And you can see that with the settler violence. So they called upon the Palestinian people to give one voice and a mandate to one group to speak on their behalf. So the people voted in the West Bank and the people voted in Gaza. But guess what? They voted for the wrong people. They voted for Hamas to represent them, to be their negotiators. And as soon as that happened, Israel started this illegal blockade by land, sea, and air upon 2.1 million people in Gaza, counting calories as to how much food could be let in to sustain the population. And they were using fuel and medicine and all types of leverage in order to control the population within Gaza. So the first kind of outworking of all that was that the PA had been their preferred negotiating partner. That's because, in my mind, the PA is like the Vichy government in France under the German occupation in the Second World War. I personally believe they are collaborators. They collaborate in security coordination. I believe there are Palestinian prisons and Palestinian prisoners that are run by the Palestinian Authority. And the connection between Sinn Féin today and the Palestinian Authority speaks volumes for people who are acquiescing in their own subjugation, again, in my opinion. So you had, I believe, I think it was the Handela, was the first ship to arrive in 2006, 2007. And they tried to bring like a maritime lifeline to Gaza and break the siege. So people have tried from 2007 onwards to break the siege. I personally have been on two land convoys. 2010, Viva Palestina 5 with George Galloway and John Herson. Whoever knows John, very good on Palestine and a good guy all around. I was then again in 2014 with Bradford to Gaza. Then I was on the Global March to Gaza in June 2025, where several hundred of us were stopped at the Ismailia checkpoint. So 3,000 people went to Cairo trying to get down to Rafah, wanted to get as close to the border as possible and protest against what was happening there. So I went with Maura, a very strong activist, a lady in her 70s from West Belfast, Maura McNally. Hope she doesn't mind me giving her name. We went together. We were stopped in Ismailia. We met Mandela at the checkpoint, and hundreds of people were beaten by Egyptian security forces and others, forced onto minibuses and returned to Cairo. So out of that came the latest kind of, what would you call that, the latest phase of the flotilla. So in 2025, I went on the flotilla. I was away for about 43 days. I was on the Alma ship with the pleasure and the honour of sailing with Tig Hickey and with Greta Thunberg and again Mandela. Activism's a very, very, very small world. You meet somebody in June in Cairo and Ismailia and watch people getting beaten. And then we ended up on the same boat on the Alma. Now, I was on the Alma for 28 days whenever the family boat that had the steering committee for the Global Sumud Flotilla, their boat broke down outside of Crete. So Tiago Avila came on our boat and asked, would 7 volunteers be prepared to leave the Alma and go on other boats and continue the mission to Gaza so that the steering committee could stay together on one boat and continue to coordinate the mission and the action. So I agreed to do that, and I was put on a boat called the Thai Jetty. It subsequently broke down, and I ended up in Crete for 8 days. Now, we put into an emergency port, the nearest port, and that turned out to be the port that has the electricity substation. So they have a private jetty for the oil tankers to arrive to supply the fuel to generate the electricity for part or all of the island of Crete. I was there for 8 days in total. Our starter motor had broken down. We were trying to fix the starter motor, get back out and join the flotilla. But after 4 days, the flotilla was intercepted. And then we were trying to get out to meet the 1,000 Madeleines that had gone 4 or 5 days afterwards. Again, the boat wasn't fixed in time. So I got a message on a Sunday night saying, Fra, stand down. This boat will take part in the flotilla, the next flotilla. So I was very conscious that I hadn't been intercepted. I hadn't completed the mission through no fault of my own. I stand over the fact that I volunteered to leave because it wasn't about me. Other people refused to leave. For me, it was the mission, and I felt that if it hadn't been for the steering committee, I wouldn't have even been on the flotilla to begin with. So the person who sent me the message, Saif, uh, I just said, look, I'm not responsible for the boat breaking down. I'm not responsible for not getting to complete the mission. So, like, kindly put my name down first for the next flotilla. So he replied, YESSSS. I kind of left it at that. So this year, whenever the flotilla come back up, it was in my mind, I've made a commitment. I've made a personal commitment that I would go back. So I decided to honor that commitment. Now I'm co-head along with Karen of the our Global Sumud, well, it's a Global March to Gaza kind of committee. So the Global Sumud Flotilla and the Global March to Gaza in conjunction decided that there would be 5 people from each nation who could go as participants on the flotilla. Now, I refused to allow myself to go as a participant because I felt I was taking somebody else's place who wanted to go. I thought it was important that different people and new people got the opportunity because that ties more people into the struggle going forward. That's a new comrade, that's a new family, that's a new community who'd hopefully be in for the next like 10, 15, 20 years. So my only possibility was to go as captain, crew, medic, or boat organizer. So thankfully, our GTMG put me forward as a boat organizer. So I went to Barcelona on the 5th of April. I did my non-violent training. We set sail for the official departure on the 12th. But because there were bad weather and storms, we put back into Barcelona port and we sailed on the 15th. So we sailed to Augusta in Sicily. And then we picked up the Italian contingent of boats along with other people from the global south. And we set sail for Gaza. And 600 miles from the Gazan coastline, the boats were hit by, initially, we thought it must be the Greek Coast Guard interfering somehow on behalf of the Israelis in the kind of functioning and progress of the flotilla. So people were saying it was the IOF, and we were going, it can't be, like we're 600 miles away. We were all focused on 150 miles out as being the interception point. So they boarded 22 boats. They kidnapped 177 people. They put them on these inflatable ribs and transferred them to a prison ship. So we had 177 people kidnapped. What they did was they cut the sails on the boats and they put contaminant in the engines and they cast them adrift in the Mediterranean Sea. So there were 22 boats floating about as a danger to maritime traffic in the Mediterranean. So what we did was we put the boat up to 7 knots on the engine and headed as quickly as possible into Greek territorial waters, assuming that the IOF wouldn't come in the territorial waters because that's an act of war. It's a huge diplomatic row. But some of the people, when they were kidnapped, were on Channel 16 on the radio. That's the International Emergency Channel calling out maydays. Now, there's a legal and moral imperative on people who hear that to come to the assistance of people in distress. So the Greek Coast Guard and the Cretan Coast Guard did absolutely nothing. So what it's done is it's shown the brutality mask has slipped yet again from the Zionist occupational forces, but it's proved that Crete and Greece, and by extension Italy, and other countries in the Mediterranean who are fully aware of this Israeli armada sailing to kidnap people in international waters, it's proven their complicity. And by strange coincidence, like 175 of the people kidnapped were then disembarked or decamped into Crete, and they ended up at the very port that I'd spent 8 days the previous year, because it is in the middle of nowhere. It's 7 kilometers from the nearest village. So they put those people off there because if they put them off at another port, people would start gathering what's happening. There'd be a whole kind of an outcry. So they dumped them in the middle of nowhere with the acquiescence and with the complicity of the Cretan authorities. Now, 34 people were taken to hospital. One person was kept in for more than 7 days with 6 broken ribs and an inflamed diaphragm and needed oxygen to help with their recuperation. 2 people, Tiago Avila and Saif, who I mentioned earlier, Saif Abu Kaish, were both taken to Israel. They were trying to charge him with terrorism. This is a deliberate attempt to not only discredit the flotilla, but to try and discourage people from continuing with the journey. So we were in Crete. We stayed there for about 4 days while, we'll call it the fleet, the flotilla regathered, and we waited for people to be returned from Heraklion, the capital of Crete, and then we started hearing the stories of the brutality. We saw people who'd been beaten. I met people who had dislocated shoulders. I met people who were in slings from the various. I mean, I promise you, Stephen, you only had to look at people's faces to have an idea of what they went through without them even having to voice it. You could just look at somebody and go, oh my God, like what has happened?
Just a
So then we
second there,
said,
Fra, if I can just come in just to clarify something. So under
mm,
whose, like the when while the activists were being held in Crete, were they being guarded or held, detained by Greek forces, or were the Israelis essentially being allowed to use Greek facilities to detain people?
no, what they did was, in the same manner they took people off the boats and took them to the prison ship, they then took them from the prison ship onto land. So they dropped them off in Crete, wiped their hands off it, got back in their boats and headed back out again for the next interception, just hanging around in the background, waiting for the opportunity to hit whatever boats were left. So last year, Stephen, there were 44 boats that got intercepted. This year there were between 80 and 100 boats when you count the Thousand Madeleines and the Freedom Flotilla Coalition. So they were so frightened of the flotilla that they wanted to take, in my mind, like bite-sized chunks. So they took 22 boats off Crete. That brought the number of boats down. We left with 58, so that took us down to like 36. And then boats are always going to end up struggling with engines and, boats that have been maybe in harbour and have been waiting to be sold and then they've been bought. And then all of a sudden they're running for like 6 days when they're not under sail, they're under motor. So it takes a big toll on some of the boats. So Tiago was beaten and Saif was beaten and they both went on hunger strike. And I actually feared for them. I thought these guys are either going to die in a Zionist dungeon or they're going to, they were told to spend 100 years in prison or they were going to murder them. That's what they told them during the torture and the interrogations. Now, they were released after about 10 days. Personally, I'm convinced because they went on hunger strike and the Israelis didn't want that type of international scrutiny being placed upon them, so they just deported them like yet again. So when we got to then, we were in Crete. So when it was time to leave Crete, we were obviously panicking on our way to Turkey that we were going to cross international waters again, and it would allow yet another opportunity for these Zionist thugs to kidnap people. Bearing in mind, everything we were doing was fully compliant with international maritime law. UN resolutions and the Fourth Geneva Convention, which states that humanitarian aid should not be like hindered, obstructed, challenged, or in any way hindered if you're taking humanitarian aid to people in need. That's both convoys and flotillas. So we got into Turkey, we got the Marmaris, and then we had the Turkish contingent. Now, there are people who aren't part of the Schengen zone. That's for Europeans. So most of the people who joined in Europe were European citizens. Most of the people who joined in Turkey were from West Africa, West Asia, Colombians, people from Latin America and the Caribbean. So, like, I'm not trying to draw this out. I'm just telling the story. Like, but so we set sail from Marmaris. Then we had some bad weather again, and we put into port. So a lot of frustrations, a lot of delays from start to finish. I was on the mission for 50 days. But what happened was then when we left Marmaris, we were heading towards Cyprus, and that's when the second set of abductions and kidnappings happened in the Mediterranean. So the first we heard was like 10:30 in the morning. We had like internal comms and we had internet, so we were able to keep in contact with the rest of the flotillas and what was happening. We heard that boats were starting to be intercepted. Like there had been a plan to spread out the flotilla as far as possible, because in the first interception, people stayed on the same course. But they were like all little ducks, one behind the other, so it just came to scoop one, scoop one, scoop one, scoop one. So the idea was that the whole flotilla would spread out. But before we had the chance to fully complete that over like a 60-mile radius, they were all ready. I don't know if they were aware in advance of what the plans were, but they hit people at 10:30 in the morning, which surprised us again. They normally arrive at night in the dark. In the first interception, we had a warship come up to our boat and shine a huge light onto our boat, and we thought we were gone. Like we thought that's us, you know, they're going to take us and to sail off. But we never even saw them. We just heard the rumble of the engines, and the next minute they were a couple of 100 feet away. So we kept going. We set the course for Gaza. There's 6 of us on the boat. We had a 25-year-old student from Norway. We had a Jewish doctor from New York. We had a Maori called Hahona, who's now a good personal friend of mine. They all are. We had Malcolm, ex-RAF jet fighter who bombed people in Oman. And now he's bringing aid to Gaza. So what kind of journey she had? And we had Ferzan, who worked for IHAHA, which is a Turkish charity, and he was our resident journalist. So we saw the warship at about 7:30 in the evening, and our internet cut out, and the different communications we were using were all being jammed. And we waited, just kept rolling the motor 7 kilometers. We saw the rib getting launched coming towards us. So we'd already planned what we had to do. We had to dump our phones, we had to dump our laptops, anything that had been used in the kitchen, like knives for cooking and for chopping, all had to go in the water. The very last thing to do as they approached was to give a mayday on the radio. So I volunteered to do that. So my last function was to nip downstairs. Everybody was in the cockpit of the ship. I nipped downstairs, grabbed the radio, pushed the automatic mayday on the radio, and then I called out like mayday, 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 Diablo, Diablo, Diablo. We are being boarded by armed men in international waters. We need assistance. Please help. So I said that a total of 3 times. And then the guy says, Fra, you have to go back upstairs. So the rib approached us. You've probably seen the videos out there. It's just an inflatable rib. They're all armed. There's somewhere between 8 and 10 of them on the rib. So the rib's packed. They came towards our boat. The call to the captain to stop the boat, stay behind the helm, and for the rest of us to go to the front of the boat. So Malcolm eased down on the throttle. They came alongside. We all went up to the front. We were wearing what we considered to be our interception clothes. We had already, like the previous day, we were sleeping in our clothes at night. We were sleeping in our life jackets just in case something happened in the dark at night. You didn't have time to get yourself organized. We went to the front of the boat and we were sitting with our hands up. And then I noticed that my 4 companions and comrades all had like red dots on their foreheads. So I thought to myself, fuck, yeah, this is serious. Like, I've got one of these in my forehead as well. So my first introduction to the IOF was, if you move, I will shoot. So we were sitting there, hands up, took us one by one, brought us over, take your shoes off, life jacket off, coat off, zip up fleece off, searched, put your life jacket back on, lie down on the boat. Now the boat's rocking in the waves, and you're not allowed to hold on to anything. So you've got your hands out in front and your legs kind of lifted at the back trying to balance, and you're bouncing up and down on the foredeck of the boat. So they then put us into the ribs. I think we were zip tied. I can't really remember, but they brought us over the boats. Bearing in mind, the deck of the boat's wet and it's slipping, and I have no shoes on, and I'm standing on the edge of the boat. And he says to me to get into the rib, and he says, "If you fall in the water, we will not rescue you." So I literally had to jump from the boat from Diablo uh, into this rib. I was shoved down, pushed into the corners. The other guys got on. So we were soaking wet. So the rib heads off. But before we left, they cut down all the rigging for the sails, and they took the ship and sailed off. And we assumed that they put contaminant in the engine, as they'd done in the other boats, and they cast it adrift. So, like, six of them were on the boat, four of them were on with us, armed, all masked up, took us to the warship, which turned out to be a prison ship. Okay. So we're walking up the wee ladder, and they have the hole cut out in the side of the warship. You climb in. Then they had like what I can only describe as like a human cattle grid. It was like a ladder on the ground, and people had to stand in these positions, one after the other. So pushed against the wall, searched again, brought over to your desk where you had to hand over your passport. We were allowed to keep our passport and our medicine, nothing else. Then my left arm was put up my back to my shoulder. My head was pulled down towards my waist, and I was like pushed unceremoniously through the ship. Then they opened a door and they pushed me out into the interior of the boat. So we believe this was some kind of amphibious landing boat or troop transporter. So it's high up here around, and it has a big empty cavernous interior. So they had these metal container ships, shipment containers, and they were like 50 feet by maybe 12 and about 30 feet by 10 or whatever. And they had four of these and portaloos in between. But they had armed masked guards up at the top. They had water cannons, and someone had been shot with a beanbag. I think it's bird shot prior to my arrival. So they'd been scooping people from 10:30 in the morning all the way through to about 10 o'clock at night. So we got there around, I don't know, 8:30 in the evening. And she'd been shot and injured in her thigh, and they had to put on like a battlefield dressing. So it had, the gotten cause, and then it was all tied off around her thigh. Somebody shouted "Free Palestine," and they just started firing at people, and she got injured. So I had to land these container ships overnight for the first night that I was there. I woke up I didn't really get to sleep, fitful sleeping. About 2 o'clock in the morning, I was sitting shaking because I was still wet from the kidnapping and lying on this metal container, freezing cold, dark at night. So the following morning, people started saying, we need toilet papers, we need water, with the man's sanitary pads for the ladies and stuff. And it ended up a negotiation with an American woman in full IDF uniform. They're all masked up. You can only ever see their eyes. This is so that you can't identify them for potential war crimes, but it also gives the person who's wearing this like total immunity. Like, nobody knows who I am. I can do whatever I want. Nobody could identify me. There was a constant threat of physical violence all the time we were there. Three different people were hit with beanbags, but there were two prison ships, and apparently in the other one, they beat nearly every single person who come on. People had to run a gauntlet between six IOF thugs who attacked people. There's this girl, Juliet, who I met, a lady and her two daughters who were on the flotilla. And she's Australian, and she says that she was beaten and that they pulled down her trousers and inserted fingers into her vagina, sexual assault. So there are 15 reports of sexual assault, including rape, 30 reports of broken bones. So 34 people on the first kidnapping ended up in hospital. And then when we were in Istanbul after our release, if we can use that word, People were giving their first-hand testimonies. So just to tie it all up, 36 hours on the boat. Then they called out people's names individually because I had a file for everyone. Took us into the interior of the boat, put on the zip ties. So you're led through into the immigration. During the immigration, I was brought behind a screened off area with black curtains. As soon as I walked in, there were two
Sorry,
Israeli.
Fra, to interrupt, but this is after you were brought to Israel, right?
That's Ashdod, the port of Ashdod,
Yeah,
Stephen.
at Ashdod. But just to come back a little bit to the experience on the ship, um, these containers that you were put onto, I presume there's nothing. You said you had to lie on a metal floor. There's nothing by the way of furniture or anything to lean against or shelving or anything in these containers. It's literally just what you'd expect a shipping container to look like. Is that right?
Absolutely. We had the joke when they dropped in some bread in cardboard boxes. People were kind of scavenging the cardboard, bits of cardboard to lay down. And people were good. They were splitting them up in a tiny wee bit of cardboard that by that could maybe go behind your head or your buttocks if you're lying in the water. And I was joking to somebody, said, I'll let you have a bit of cardboard if you give me like a cigarette, but no cigarettes and stuff. But so we had a wee bit of fun, but like it obviously wasn't a fun experience, especially
And
with
how
our
many was there a light? Was it dark inside the containers?
no, it was pitch black, mate. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Pitch black. So there was no
People,
artificial lighting or anything. So this is like you were
no,
intercepted at night, 8:30 p.m. So it was already
yeah.
getting
So I
dark or
spent
already dark. Yeah.
Yep. Well, that's what I'm saying. I woke up at like 2 in the morning, freezing cold. I was actually
Yeah.
shivering from the cold. And then people were sleeping in the fetal position.
Uh-huh.
Because if you imagine something that I said it's maybe 15 feet, it's closer to probably 10 feet across. And then so people were lying in the fetal position with their legs up, you couldn't stretch out. And then if people needed to go to the toilet in the dark of the night, they're kind of like stepping on people because you can't see. Like in the boats, we all had our wee night lights so we could see on the boat in the dark, but no, absolutely nothing. So they brought us into the port of Ashdod. They brought me into this wee room behind the curtains. I swear to God, as soon as I went in there, I thought they were going to beat me. I could feel the menace straight away as soon as I walked in. So one of them says to me, lift your top. So I pulled my top up to my shoulders and I retracted my stomach muscles because I just thought he's going to smack me, And I don't know if he reacted to me doing that and he went, no, like, take it off, take it off, take it off. And I said, take the jeans off. Now, I've been searched 3 times already, but on the top of your jeans, there's a tiny wee pocket and I had like €2 and two matchsticks in it because I've been smoking roll ups and using the match to push in the tobacco and then into the bottom of the roll up. So he says to me, you want to start a fire on? And then I had to pull down my underwear and then I was touched in both testicles, which I don't believe is necessary as part of a strip search when people can see exactly what's going on. So that was the first strip search. Then it brought us through this immigration process and they were trying to push us to sign a voluntary deportation order. So I had been charged, as everyone else, or 434 people, I believe, went through this. I was charged with being part of a coalition of people trying to break the Israeli siege on Gaza or words to that effect. So they took my photograph and stuff, and a guy was actually going through, he had a paper and he was going through things, he was ticking it off. And I saw him, using the mouse and he was flicking down something. And I thought, oh my God, he's on my social media because they were at pains to tell us on the flotilla, don't have anything on your phone that won't stand up in court. Because if you have something, let's say anti-Semitic for the sake of it, or something, celebrating something happening to Jewish soldiers or something, or Israeli soldiers, you could end up in serious trouble. And I thought to myself, they told us consistently, don't have anything in your phone. But sure, I dumped my phone. I had nothing to worry about, but I hadn't logged out of social media. So the guy goes on the radio, right? And he's talking to somebody and they're moving me further along the process and they're trying to get me to sign this form. And I said that I would answer no questions and sign no documents until I spoke to somebody, a consular representative of the Irish embassy. So that was my consistent response all the way through. Now, it mightn't sound brave, and I'm not saying it is, but it took a bit of courage to say it because what we've gone through before, beginning with if you move, I will shoot you, then shooting people on the prison ship, then telling us when we were leaving one by one, called out on the ship, that if you clap, cheer, or say Free Palestine, there will be violence. We were told that for a fact. You know, basically comply, you'll suffer what you suffer, but it mightn't be as bad if you try and show any form of resistance. So I saw one or two ladies, and you know, that were also going through this process, being assaulted, being slapped behind the heads when they refused to give their name or refused to cooperate. So I ended up at a table where there were three people behind a screen, and the guy says to me, "So I'm imagining there's immigration, then there's possibly Mossad, and possibly Sinn Bet. I'm sure all the security people were there, and they were filtering people through." So I sat, so they moved me, this was at the fourth table I was at. "Are you going to cooperate with me?" I said, "I'm answering no questions, I'm signing no documents." He goes, "Right, right, 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 right." So he starts scrolling on the screen, and I'm sitting there going, "This must be my social media." And that's exactly what you do on your phone or on your computer, you're scrolling down. And then the girl has my passport. Now I've got 5 stamps from Syria, the Syrian Arab Republic. I've 4 stamps from Lebanon. I've stamps from the Donbass, Venezuela, uh, South Africa, and Iraq. So one of them's looking through my thing, showing it to the other ones, like all the places he's been, like a person of interest. And then he's flicking down, and then there's 5 of them behind the screen. And then at one stage, the 2 of them turn around and high five. And I'm sitting there going, fuck. Either the GSF's going to get it or I'm going to get it here for stuff that I put. And he printed off like 12 sheets of paper, which I imagine are comments that I put. Because before I was intercepted, I was going, the baby killers are coming after us. We're still running for Gaza, etc., etc., etc. So they brought us through the system. And then at the finish of that, we were put in metal handcuffs that said made in the UK. And we're put in ankle chains. So yeah, watch some American movies when people are walking about like this here. So I had no shoes on. To put us on the prison bus, and I was at the front. I was actually initially blindfolded. So the first 3 people who come on were blindfolded, but everybody else after that wasn't. So I just took mine off after 10 minutes and threw it in the ground. But I was able to look out the front. There was a wee gap at the front of the bus. So when we came towards the prison and the bus stopped, I was able to look out. I could see our like welcoming committee all putting their masks on and the dogs barking just to get that fear and intimidation going, you know, and had the attack dogs there. And I don't know how it happened, but in the prison van, you know, people had scrolled over on like Free Palestine. And I don't know how this happens, but it actually says IRA inside an Israeli prison van that was going between Ashdod and Ketziat prison. So somebody must have done that with their cuffs on the side of the van. So be interesting when people get in that van and see that. I wonder what will go through their minds. So look, they took us off. Each person had a guard, called out their name, dragged you down the steps by the handcuffs. I have no shoes on, so the chains are beating off my toes. So I'm in quite a bit of pain, right? So I'm pulling back, saying, for fuck's sake, you know. But the more you try to struggle, the more they force you, you know, quicker and drag you along. So to cut a long story short, they moved us between these different places where you had to assume the position, which was when you went in there, they took off the leg chains and they took off the cuffs that are made in the United Kingdom. Then,
I'm
so
sorry,
we went,
Fred. When you say the leg chains, you were chained to one another. Is that right?
no, 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 just leg chains for
Okay.
me personally and everybody
Mhm.
else. So you couldn't walk too fast and you couldn't walk
Okay,
too
but you
quick.
weren't chained one prisoner to the next, one activist to
No,
the next, one person.
no, thankfully not. No. So then they put handcuffs behind our back. So they took us into a room, put us in a stress positions, made us look at the wall and stuff and do that total supplication where you're on your knees, where your kind of hindquarters are towards your heels and your head's fully down on the ground as much as possible, and you're tied behind your back. So part of it behind sets the process, and the hundreds of people of process coming off them buses, or not buses, the prison vans. So they have you in a holding area, and then they call out the name, and then they take out. So they brought me around for what was to be the second strip search, and they brought me into this room. So bear in mind, my hands are handcuffed behind my back. The guy tells me to get on the ground. Now, normally you put your hands out to balance yourself on the ground. So I'm trying to go down on my left knee to get my balance. And I got a boot in the back. And I ended up laying on my side on the ground. Then he grabbed the handcuffs, which were behind me, and he trailed me up in the air and then threw me back onto the ground. Now, less than 60 seconds later, it will stand up, turn around, put your, undid the cuffs, right? Then strip search a second time, squat in front of the mirror. Then you're given this prison uniform. So all I had was this top, jogging bottoms, no underwear. Everything was taken away. The doors left open out in the hallway for anybody walking by to see. And I know I'll not mention her name. It's up to her. One of the comrades is stripped. She was stripped naked as I was, and there was a male guard outside, and she was forced to stand, hands up while he tried to humiliate her and make her feel small. So it took me out, and so they put the cuffs back on, but they put them on at the front. So I'm out kneeling down, and then they brought like another 9 or 10 people out, and they were like a mother hen with all the wee ducks in a row. And what happened was I was in the lead, and the person behind me had to grab hold of the back of this top all the way down. So then they lifted me up, and my head was pushed down again, so all I could see is the ground. And they're steering me round into another holding area. And at this point, one of the guards says to me, "Have you had enough yet? Do you want to go home?" So obviously I didn't say anything. Then it brought us round to that we'd been told in advance, so the story's nearly over, but we told in advance that they brought out a new law that we could be deported within 24 hours. So my hope all along was if we did get kidnapped and we were taken to occupied Palestine, that the courts would come to the jail and that we wouldn't go to the courts. Because last year, people were released between 3 days and 11 days. It's a fucking long time to be in an Israeli dungeon, But we were treated like Palestinians. They had the attack dogs. A lot of people that were very badly beaten especially on that prison ship. I met people punches to their faces and stuff, and people that you go to give them a hug and no, 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 like their ribs were sore from the beatings that they got. So they brought us in front of a judge, and there were 3 of us. There was an Italian guy, and she was speaking to him, and then there was somebody on like an intercom, and I thought it must be somebody from Adala, or lawyers or judicial representatives. So he's talking in Italian. Then the woman says to me and this other guy, I think was Basque, "Do you both speak English?" And we said yes. And then she started talking to him, and I said, "Excuse me, like who's that on that intercom?" And she says, "That's an interpreter." And I says, "Like, is he Israeli?" And she says, "Yes." So like I thought it was like a lawyer who was going to represent us, so we were getting that kind of representation. So she said to the guy, the boss guy, "Do you want to go home?" They've been trying to force people all along to sign this voluntary deportation order to say that you had illegally entered Israel. And that's what I think a lot of the pressure and the intimidation and the threat of violence and this disorientation and confusion and moving you around was all about. So for
Sorry,
Tuesday,
Frank,
guy,
could you just talk a little bit more about the significance of that? And also, did you and the others agree, was that part of your training that you would not do that and that you would, insist on consular support? Like, had all of you agreed to follow the same procedure? And also, what would have been the consequences of signing that document?
okay, good question. During our non-violent treatment, we were encouraged and trained to de-escalate. So if you believe that these people would fly off the handle at the drop of a hat at you saying free Palestine or shooting people with beanbags, right? So we were trained to de-escalate. We were told, you can sign that if you want, but the chances are you'll sign that, you'll be going home at the same time as the people who don't sign it. It's a personal, preference. So what they said was sign this form, you'll be home within 24 hours. Don't sign this form, welcome to Israel, you could be here a long time. So added with the intimidation, the constant threat of the immediacy of violence being visited upon you, the disorientation, the confusion. I wouldn't be surprised if some people had signed it, but listen, before I left Belfast, I had it in my mind, I'll see this through one day at a time till you get home, get through whatever you have to get through, sort it all out psychologically, emotionally, when you're back safe and sound at home. So that was my philosophy all the way through. So this boss guy says to her when she says, "Would you like to go home, sign this form?" He says, "I've committed no crime. You're the war criminals." I thought, it takes guts, buddy. I was sitting beside him. He says to me, "Do you want to go home?" I said, "I'm answering no questions. I'm signing no documents until I speak to somebody, a consular member of the embassy." And then I says, "So what happens next? What's the next process?" And she just called the guard from outside. So he brought us back round into what turned out to be our last stage before the holding cell. They put us in these cages that you see the Palestinians, and it's just out in the bright sunlight. It's just a cage with a metal bar. Went in there, we were sitting down, and then it said, everybody face front, everybody head down. And then the guy starts saying, calling people's names out one by one. He says, put your name and your telephone number on this bit of paper and say you want to be deported. I will do everything for you. Don't worry. I'll get it all sorted. You'll be home tomorrow. This is over. So I'm lying on the ground and I'm trying to look around to see what's happening because they're calling people up one by one. And I saw a guy with a pen in his hand and I thought, Jesus Christ, this is falling apart. People are that frightened that they're filling it in. So then he calls out the boss guy. He was like, because we'd gone through the same sequence. They were going through the sequence of people put in the cage. So they went to him and he said no. And then they called out my name and I started the usual refrain. I'm not answering any questions. And before I could go any further, he goes, okay, okay, okay. And he calls out somebody else's name. So then it brought us round through the last set of like dogs. It brought us into a cage that had like canvas sides, like a tent. And we were in there, the three of us, there were three of them side by side. They put three of us in the middle one, they put people in the end ones. And like after half an hour when I was talking to people, they had like 24 metal bunks. And I just lay down on the bunk, mate, and I went to sleep. Between the tiredness, I haven't even talked about all the days we were on the boats. See, when we were doing on the boats for like 5 or 6 days at a trot, the boats were running 24 hours. You always had to have two people at any time upstairs. You had the drone watch. You had the person behind the helm. It was nearly always under autopilot. You just set the course, set the autopilot, put the power up and down. We were told do 4.5 knots, do 5.5 knots, do 6, do 4. We just followed the instructions. And we did like 3 hours on, 6 hours off. So I did like 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. with Magnus. I'm on drone watch for an hour. He's behind the helm. Then I'm behind the helm. He's on drone watch for an hour. So we're watching the sky. We're talking. I'm having a cigarette. We're passing the time. But then at 7 o'clock, when somebody else is coming on, they go, do you want a cup of tea? Do you want some porridge? Make a bit of breakfast. Before you know it, it's like 9:30. You're sitting talking. And then you're thinking, fuck, I'm back on at 1. I might try and get some sleep. So you go down to sleep in the double cabin and the engine's going num 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 num. You can't get any sleep, and then the heat's coming off the engine, so it's like a sauna. The noise, you can't sleep. You're constantly tired, not irritable, thankfully, but like tired and exhausted from time to time. So if I did 4 a.m. to 7 a.m., we were off until 1 p.m. 1 to 4 you did, and you were back on 10 p.m. and 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. and then back on at 7. So it moved forward 3 hours every day as you went through this. We were doing that for like a week at a time. So I fell asleep on the bunk bed. Somebody woke me up at midnight. The room was filled with people, filled with people. And somebody says to me, there's a mattress and there's a blanket. And I went, oh my God, thank you so much. Because it was cold. And I just put the blanket around me and went back to sleep. Following morning, they shipped us off back into the prison buses to take us to what turned out to be Ramon Airport. So we got on back on the thing again. We're handcuffed. We're in behind this metal screen, into the door, metal screen, sitting on metal chairs, 2 by 2 all the way along. And the guard's and he's on his phone. So we started talking among ourselves. And then some guy says, what about a sing song? And he looked at me because I was right at the front. So it was like me, there was me, then an English guy, and then two guys here and everybody else behind us. So I says, I'll sing a song. So I sung what I thought was very appropriate, The Fields of Athenry, because it starts off by Only Prism All. So I started singing it, but I kept looking to see what the guard would do, to see if he would react. Nothing. So I sung that, then I sung a few more songs, then we sung Viva Viva Palestina to the tune of Bella Ciao. We're singing that. I think somebody started like Death, Death to the IDF, and then I get up, he was banging on the thing, shut the fuck up, shut the fuck up. And then he took out what looked to be like a CS canister or pepper spray or something. He threatened to fucking spray us. So we quietened down for about half an hour. We finally got after about 3 hours on the prison bus. We finally got to the airport. So they give us all a bottle of water. The idea was, you'd walk through the airport for the press, whoever happened to be there, drinking water. So we drank it before we walked through, but they made us go through in single file. So I'm down and along, going through the airport. I mean, there's no check-in desk, obviously. We were being deported. We're going on Turkish Airlines. Turkish Airlines have volunteered to bring everybody home for free. So I started walking through the airport, and out of the corner of my eye, I see like 10 or 11 people there. And one of them's got a small Irish tricolor and he's waving it. And he goes, Fra, it's Owen from the embassy. Are you okay? So I says, Owen, they're beating people in the prison, mate. I'll tell you all about it in Istanbul. And then I go, Free Palestine. So I'm walking on through, like you're waiting to get a dig in the back of the head. But with hindsight, with the people from the
And
embassy
sorry,
there,
Fred, this is a military airport or civilian airport?
no, I think it's civilian. But I tell you what, we counted 19 American transport planes on the apron. I counted 19 from the side of the Turkish Airlines thing. So came through the first part, came through the second part. A guy was sitting there with his phone, right? So I was going like Free Palestine on the way by. One of the guards is going, there's no cameras here, there's no one to see, keep going, keep going, keep going. So I walked around and I was at the top of a de-escalator, whatever it's called, when you're going down, and I could see all these Israelis in behind the partition waiting for their flight. So I was on the top of the escalators wearing a grey prison uniform, and they knew what was happening because they'd seen people all coming in and coming down. So I was on the top of this escalator going down. I just put my fingers up when I was looking at them. And when I got to the bottom, they brought me out onto the apron, and there was one Israeli guard and two of the grounds people at the bottom of the airplane. So when I was going past them, I looked them in the eye and said, Free Palestine. And I walked up the steps of the plane, and I swear to God, for the first 6 steps, I was just waiting to be going to haul back. Because if you'd have done that anywhere else, you'd have got beaten, 100%. So went to Istanbul, got an official reception from the Turkish government. Well, I don't know if people have seen that, but we got down off that plane, and there were about 10 of them there, and I was shaking hands with everybody getting off. The second guy that I shook hands with, I looked him in the eye and I said, we've just gone through a minuscule amount of what Palestinian prisoners suffer every day. It's your duty to get them out. I'm not interested in saying that to the press. I was interested in saying that to the Turks. As far as I'm concerned, they're just using the Palestinians for internal, political consumption, just like political parties do here. And I think I might have met the minister because he's in a suit and he had the wee Turkish badge. And I'm not sure he spoke English, but I said exactly the same thing to him. Then it took us to a medical centre. We were there between 9:30 and 4 in the morning. And I took the depositions from everybody, what they'd suffered, medical examinations, blood, urine. People had concussion, people had broken ribs, some people were taken to hospital. And I think last week there were still one or two people in the hospital recovering. So sorry that took so long, but that's the story, like.
Don't be sorry. I mean, there's so many questions come up around it. It's amazing. Um, Before we open it up to the group, just some of the things that just to kind of get a stronger sense of the series of events. How many nights or how many days were you in Ashdod and in Israeli detention after you landed? And how much time did you spend before that on the prison ship?
Okay, yep. 36 hours, I reckon, on the prison ship. So one night, another full day, and then we went about 10 o'clock the following morning. So 36 hours on the prison ship. Ashdod was just a procedural process that you had to go through, which included being offered on like 6 or 7 different occasions, signing this form to get home. And then we arrived in the prison at maybe 2 in the afternoon, and we left at maybe 10 o'clock the next morning. So that's another, whatever that is, 18 hours prison.
So you spent roughly 3 days in
Yeah.
in Palestine,
Mhm.
occupied Palestine. Did you have any, did you see or did you hear any Palestinian prisoners while you were there?
No, and I had it in my mind. I don't know why. I thought the prison system would be like the H blocks or something, a criminal jail. Like that would be the experience that people would have here of what the prison looks like, with the cell doors, like porridge. And I used to be on TV all those years ago. Like I promised myself if I'd be brought in somewhere, I'd should Chucky Arla just to take a slap for it on the way through. But no, we were brought in through all this, and it's an outdoor detention center. I don't know what the rest of the prison's like. Some people said that they overheard somebody. Some of the prison guards are like Druze or whatever. They're uh, Arab Israelis, whatever way you want to describe that, and they're in the prison service. And someone who speaks Arabic heard them talking in Arabic about one of the Palestinian prisoners. So It's Ketsia. I haven't Googled it, but I'm sure it's a maximum high security prison, and I'm sure the Palestinians that are raped, beaten, and murdered and tortured are detained there, among other
Mhm.
facilities. It's in the Negev, it's in the middle of nowhere. They make it
Yeah,
hard for families to travel.
right. So you were transported from Ashdod down into the Negev. How long were you in the prison van? It must have taken at least what, 2 hours or
Long enough to do a bit of graffiti. Yeah, I think
yeah,
it was
yeah.
about 3 hours in total. Like,
And what since you like you had that brief contact with the Irish embassy staff member there at the Israeli airport, has there been much follow-up with the Irish authorities since then?
uh, not with me personally, but I have to say that Dan, the representative in Istanbul, that guy was fantastic, and so were the Turkish people who work for the Irish delegation. They couldn't have done enough. I mean, they got you razors, they got you food, they got you, if you needed it, they got us cigarettes and stuff. When I arrived in Istanbul, 4 days without cigarettes, as you can see, I was like, how can any cigarettes? So no, I couldn't fault them on any level. I know people complained that, if they repatriated us, we'd have to pay them back. And if they put us up in a hotel, we'd have to pay for the hotel. But with hindsight, and to be fair to everybody, you're kidnapped in international waters. You expect your government to stand by you. You don't expect them to charge you. But then their consular duty is it's for people who've lost their passport. It's for people who have been injured. It's for people who have been maybe, I don't know, assaulted or fallen or had a heart attack. Their job's to get you home. Their job's not to pay for that. Their job is to get you home if you have no money, and then you repay the government. So I actually don't have a huge issue with that. And in the end, the Global Sumud Flotilla paid for the accommodation, paid for the food, and paid to get everybody home. And when it comes to GSF, I don't care what anybody says. From the minute we went on that to the minute we went home, they said at any stage, if you don't have the capacity to continue with the mission, you can get off at any port. We'll get you sorted. We'll get you home. So I personally want to thank GSF, and I want to thank our global movement to Gaza, because they held a lot of the families together. So Pauline was updated like every day where we were, what was happening. And I was phoning Pauline every day, obviously, to try and reassure. But I think the biggest thing was, I'd said all along, I said to her last year, don't worry until we're 4 days from Gaza. Don't panic about a thing. Don't listen to anything anybody tells you. When we get into the, what would you call it, the interception zone, that's when you need to worry. And you're not to worry until I tell you to start worrying. But once the boats were hit 600 miles out, like 5 days in or something, people were worrying every day what's going to happen if we were to sea.
And I mean, given that you were intercepted in international waters, I mean that Israel doesn't have any under international law any legal authority even over the waters of Gaza, but there is, there's a kind of a new precedent in this, both the initial interception and the second one. So this is a crime committed against multiple citizens of multiple countries. I mean, has there been any movement on that? Has the Department of Foreign Affairs been in touch with you or anybody else? Um, is there likely to be any representation by the Irish government about this crime?
Well, I know the guys from last year went and made witness statements to the guards that they'd been illegally kidnapped in international waters. That's probably 10 months ago now. So I don't know what the follow up has been. I don't know whether or not maybe someone can advise me if I should go to a solicitor here to represent me, so I can make a witness statement to them, which they can be forwarded to the PPS or whatever. Uh, so, no, but what it proved is that Israel now thinks that the Mediterranean basin is an area for Zionist operation, that they can sail, anybody can sail in international waters, right? But they can sail past Turkey, Cyprus, Crete. I mean, say next time there are 200 boats, they're probably going to hit them off Italy, international waters, even off Barcelona. So immunity, impunity, this whole ethos that they are somehow above international law. And a member of the Knesset said international law does not apply to Jews. These aren't my words, these are his words. That shows you this chosen mentality, this fascist white colonial supremacism that exists in the Israeli state. And when you see settlers as young as 14 with sticks beating women in Palestinian villages and towns and farms in the West Bank, and the IOF are not just protecting them, but I see a lot of the settlers as IOF out of uniform. You know,
Hmm.
guys have been to 30, who've been in the army or in the
Yeah,
army, just left the army. They're the people that's beating people.
absolutely. So I'd like to open it up to anybody who has a question or a comment. I mean, there's a lot there, Fra. I mean, does anyone have their own experience or just would like to ask Fra anything about what he went through and what's next? Come on, guys, don't be shy. Well, I mean, if I'll jump in then. I mean, what is next? I mean, is GSF? Not that I'm asking you to reveal any secrets, but is there this is not likely to be the last flotilla, I presume.
No, if you remember that the flotilla in 2010, the Mavi Marmara, the murdered 10 people on that boat, that
Yeah.
was actually, everyone has a pivotal point in time, Republican history, socialist history, take your pick, where people say enough's enough and a step up to whatever that line is and then a crossover. Well, that's what I did in 2010. I watched those people and heard of those people being murdered. And 3 months later, that was on the 31st of May 2010. On the 21st of October 2010, on my birthday, I got into Gaza with Tony Upton on a 13-seater wheelchair accessible minibus, which we donated to the Al Auda Hospital, which I believe is no longer operational under the present circumstances. But I just want to recenter things. I know I'm talking about me. I know I'm talking about GSF, but it's about the genocide, it's about the ethnic cleansing, it's about the Greater Israel Project, it's about bombing Lebanon, 1 million refugees, it's the Palestinian prisoners, 1,500,000 people still incarcerated. Part of me feels that we left them behind when we come home. And I found my mind drifting from time to time, not to what happened to me, but what they're constantly going through day by day. And I know there's a fight for Palestine, and I know people in this call are involved in it. And I just want to salute that because I've had a small, minuscule taste of what those people are suffering every day, and it's barbaric, it's inhuman, it's brutal, it's thuggish, it's fascist, it's imperialist, it's colonial, it's everything any colonized people in the world, including the Irish, have ever suffered from. And, that's front and center what people should be thinking about and talking about.
Yeah. On that note, maybe I can just call on Barry. Would you like to come in there and just talk about where Palestinian resistance stands right now? Um, nearly 3 years into the Gaza genocide, what are the options available and what is, you know, what can be done within Palestine right now to resist this seemingly unstoppable force?
Well, it's clear to the world that the Palestinian resistance was not defeated. Okay, they leveled buildings and they have destroyed cities. They haven't broken the will of the people, and they certainly haven't broken the will of the resistance any more than they've done so in Lebanon or indeed Iran, for that matter. So the lesson in that is that, I mean, resistance, whatever form it might take, against imperialism and occupation is essential. I mean, imperialism and occupation demands that, unfortunately. It's not that we advocate for war or advocate for violence. The reality is that the system has created a system worldwide, effectively, whereby human beings are no longer human beings, as Fra pointed out. I mean, the fact that the Zionists can go to international waters 600 miles from their shores and arrest a human rights flotilla. That nobody in Western imperialism or the Western capitalism speaks up or says anything. It's just reported. Sometimes it's not even reported. And this is the type of thing that is necessary. What Fra and all of those people went through is, it's a necessary part of struggle and resistance against people who don't recognize humanity. Where is the Palestinian struggle going? Well, the struggle's still going on in Palestine. The Israelis are still killing people there. Iran holds the cards at the minute, and Iran clearly is making it quite clear to everybody that there's no ceasefire and Israeli withdrawals from both Lebanon and Palestine, Gaza in particular, then there's no ceasefire. And that's a fair demand to make. Because generally speaking, countries look after their own affairs and manage their own affairs. And when it comes tight to the wall, they say, well, okay, we have to get our affairs in order here so everybody else can suck it up. But they don't appear to be saying that. So the struggle's far from over, and there's an awful lot that people right throughout the world, Ireland, anywhere in the world, can actually do to still highlight these things. Gaza has a kind of fell off the news reels a little bit because it's now Iran, But it's the same struggle, in fact. And I think we need to be mindful of that. And there's still a lot that we can do, as Fra and as Comrade's point just demonstrated.
Yeah. It's we've talked a lot about the shift in public opinion, particularly in the United States, but also in a lot of European countries in relation to Israel. But yet we've yet to see that reflected in government action. There's been a few, the Spanish government has made some statements and moves that are in the right direction, but it's very hard to know how much, how deep that goes. We also saw Spanish Sumud Flotilla activists being welcomed back into Bilbao airport with batons and kicks, and barely a word from the Spanish Prime Minister as a result. So, what is the breaking point? There's obviously been a huge sea change in public opinion, particularly crucially in the United States. Polls for the last year or 2 years have been all heading in exactly the same direction. You've got a lot of these very prominent figures in the culture, both left and right, who are coming out with the kind of rhetoric that a few years ago would have been unthinkable in relation to Israel. And yet, nothing within the political establishment. So it's almost like the political establishment in the West has to break as much as Israel has to break. It's all part of the same. They've essentially thrown their lot in with Israel.
Well, I think it's a mistake for the populace, the general population, to think, that governments are going to be their saviors or that governments are going to take action. They're not. We've got to just accept that that's not going to be the case. We can force governments to take a certain amount of action, and they will, under serious pressure, take tactical deflection action any way they can. But that's not enough. That's not the end of the matter by a long shot. Even if the government brings in the Occupied Territories Bill, or even if they condemn Israel, that's very superficial, really, and the chances of that even happening is fairly small in most Western democracies, so-called democracies around the world. So what needs to come out of this Palestinian, Lebanese, and Iranian struggle is that Western democracy needs to be turned upside down, and Western democracy needs to become a people-powered democracy anywhere that it can be. There's a golden opportunity here for those of us on the left to put together people's communities and committees within areas now and link them to all of the issues. Because remember, okay, it's Palestine now. It was Palestine. It's Iran now, and then it's Lebanon, and then it could be Syria, and then it's Venezuela, and then it's and on and on and on it goes.
Cuba.
The only advantage that I see in any of that is that it begins to enlighten people, and that people become enlightened and begin to realize the world doesn't work the way you were taught or thought that it did work.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's important that out of all of that, is the building of people's understanding and political awareness and class consciousness, indeed, that they begin to understand, that the world is the world of the rich and powerful, and it's not the world of the majority, the poor and working poor. And that's why Palestine happens. That's why Venezuela happens. That's why Cuba happens. That's why any of these attacks on people-powered democracies are happening. But we need to know that we need to get it into our heads quite clearly that there is no way in the world that governments, elected bourgeois governments, are going to have our interests at heart. Like, it's not happening. We have 200 or 300 years of the evidence of that.
Mm-hmm.
How much more do we need? And the whole thing has been sharpened now by the struggle in Gaza and the struggle in Lebanon and Iran and Cuba. So, I mean, that's the important thing. Not, okay, we have to support all of these things. We have to demonstrate, we have to point out to governments that, that their inadequacies and their ignorances and their ignorances and all of that. But that said, we have to be building something better. We have to build a new world, a new type of people-powered democracy within Ireland, England, America, wherever.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And I mean, as you said, the Occupied Territories Bill is grossly inadequate. It's very much a case of too little, far too late. And yet, I think it still has value as it is a chip, a further chip away at the wall that is Zionist control. And the fact that they're so scared of it, I mean, that's what came through to me as well, listening to you talk, Fra, is that they were scared of you. They were terrorizing you and intimidating and doing everything they could to frighten you. But ultimately, they were scared of you. And it sounds like even the decision to intercept so early was probably because they feared that, the flotilla was going to have greater impact. So there was a moment there where it looked like the Occupied Territories Bill was going to be pushed through. But again, it seems to be put back on the back burner. That's more than likely it's the United States have done their usual back channel kind of string pulling, particularly the strings of Micheál Martin, which seems, his strings seem to be fully controlled from Washington. I don't know, maybe Owen, would you like to come in there and talk a little bit about the Irish resonance on this? I mean, Ireland, what I've noticed talking to people in the last while, maybe up to 6 months ago, people were usually very full of praise for Ireland and Ireland's, tradition of Palestine solidarity. But what I'm hearing more and more is, Irish people are great, the Irish government, not so much. So it seems to be filtering through that there's this chasm between popular sentiment and political action.
Yeah, I mean, we need to bring it back home as well. The reason that we're suffering austerity and cost of living crisis, it's all connected, and we're subsidizing the very infrastructure that is killing Palestinians, like with all of this data centre, Intel in Naas, County Kildare. You know, I suppose the Occupied Territory Bill, um, they're so scared of it, but it doesn't even touch this stuff. Not that maybe it does to a certain extent, but um, not that I know of. And this is the real infrastructure of debt here on this island. But I think it's starting to resonate with people now, like because we know that we have the highest energy prices in Europe. People are struggling. So we need to just keep joining the dots, I suppose, for people to see that, people to see, and that's the way we build solidarity, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very noticeable. I don't know if on social media, if many of you have already abandoned social media because it's so polluted at this stage, but there's been a very obvious influx of Zionist money into social media in the last, I would say, month or so. And a lot of it is focused on Ireland. Certainly, my feed is full of these Zionist accounts that I never saw before. Many of them claiming to be Irish people, and you know, muddying the waters, claiming that this is why is Ireland getting involved in things that it doesn't understand, blah blah blah, and a kind of a demoralization psychological operation. Um, and again, it's probably a sign that it's working, that our solidarity isn't, you know, um, is hitting home to some extent. Emma has her hand raised. Emma, do you want to jump in there and ask a question or make a comment?
Oh, God. Yes, I have two questions actually. And I'll just ask them both first and then I'll go silent again. Um, is there a connection between the flotilla and the land convoy? Like, did you know what each other were doing? Because I know they were obviously taken as well, or at least 10 of them were taken. I don't know the full ins and outs. And are you concerned about the next flotilla if it's escalating? What's going to happen to the next time round? I mean, it's actually quite scary if you think about it, where it'll all end up.
Yeah,
So,
well,
Fra,
I
yeah,
would.
go ahead.
Yep, no, thank you. No, well, they're two good questions. Yes, the flotilla and the convoy were acting in unison. The idea was that the flotilla would get to Gaza and/or interception at the same time that the convoy should arrive in Rafah. So the idea was the convoy would go to Rafah and we would go to Gaza. You'd have a land convoy and the maritime flotilla putting like a pincer movement, putting pressure on the Egyptians to let the people in from Libya and putting pressure on the Zionists to allow us to get into Gaza. So yeah, 10 people have been detained or still detained. I believe they're being charged with possibly entering eastern Libya illegally. So people are pushing to get them released. And I've heard something about the Italian embassy saying that they've been well treated, but it's possible that they're going to have to go through some form of deportation uh, exercise. Yeah, I mean, people raped, sexually assaulted, 34 people in the first kidnapping went to hospital, 30 people, broken bones, ribs, collarbones, dislocated shoulders, broken ankles, people shot with BB guns. Uh, it's all acting as a deterrent. So the more you tell the story of what happened, the more people might go, Jesus, like, I'm not going on that. That's very, very, very dangerous. I must say, in the last 3 years, that I have met so many strong women that I am in awe of the courage that many of them had shown. I mean, we're all worried about some form of sexual violence being perpetrated upon our person, but like the women, obviously, huge, huge, huge respect to them for what they were prepared. I see. I don't even want to say that what they're prepared to go through. Like no one should suffer that kind of violence. But yeah, I think potentially it'll be worse next time. But this whole idea of that frightened that they did intercept people 600 miles off the coastline and that they did get us deported within 24 hours, that they did put people off in Crete. My money was on they were going to put us off in Cyprus. We were having conversations on the boat. I says they're going to hit us before Cyprus. They're going to put us off in Cyprus just like they did Crete and we'll go home. The only explanation I could possibly have is either Ben Giver, he was supposed to be outraged that these people had been put on Crete and he didn't have a chance to humiliate them and have them like violated and violence visited upon them, that he demanded that we were brought to occupied Palestine, or Cyprus refused to take us. That's the only two ways to look at it. And I just want to throw in a couple of wee things there. I mean, Shannon Airport, obviously a problem. When we were being brutalized on them prison ships, they were voting against the sanction of Israel bill. So no matter what they say in public to appease public opinion here, they were voting to protect the people who were brutalizing and terrorizing us on those prison ships and in that prison. And Irish neutrality, I mean, these people are voting away our neutrality so that at some stage, Irish men and Irish women could be in the European army doing exactly the same thing as a colonial imperialist power in Africa or West Asia or wherever you want that the EU decides, even Ukraine, God forbid. Could you imagine Irish boys and girls having to fight on behalf of the fascists in Ukraine? So there's a lot going on that we need to be fighting against.
Thanks, Fra. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now in a moment, or I'll actually just wrap it up. But before I do, I just want to thank you, Fra, for taking the time to be with us. Thank you for your courage, for your willingness to put your body on the line as you did. And it's inspiring and it's very, very, yeah, it's solidarity in action. But thank you, Mahu, and respect.
Thank you.